So in these notes, we're going to be reviewing order of operations and substituting numbers into an expression so that we can follow order of operations. So the big thing is here that we want to follow GEMDAS. You could have also heard this as PEMDAS. It's the same thing. It's just telling us the order that we want to complete a problem in so that we don't disrupt the magical laws of math. It is actually important that you follow these every single time. You want to make sure that you think of these two together, multiplication and division, and addition and subtraction together, because those operations go left to right. So if you're deciding just between multiplication and division or addition and subtraction, that's why I'm writing them like that. It's because you have to go left to right. So even though the m comes first, if you see the division on the left side of multiplication, you'd actually complete that first. So the P or G stands for parentheses or grouping symbols. The reason we're extending that to a grouping symbol, or G, is because we're going to be talking about square roots, cube roots, and absolute value. All of those group different terms, and we want to complete inside of there first before we do anything else. Once you do the operations inside of the grouping symbol, you're always going to be left with multiplication. If there's just a number sitting on the outside of that grouping symbol, it's being multiplied by the result of whatever you get from inside the grouping symbol. After that, we'll do exponents, and then, like I said, we'll do multiplication and division together, working left to right, and then add and subtract left to right. So here we're just going to circle the operation that we're going to perform first. So on that first one, we're looking at 4 minus 9 plus 6 plus 10 minus 7. We have addition and subtraction going left to right. We have subtraction, then addition, addition, subtraction. So going from left to right, we would start with this 4 minus 9. On the next one, we have 12 divided by 3 times 10 minus 12. That minus 12 is going to happen at the end. That's subtraction. We have a division and a multiplication problem. We're going to start with the division. 12 divided by 3 would give us 4 first, then we would multiply it times 10. On the third one, we have 5 times negative 3 squared minus 1. So we have multiplication here. In between the number and the parentheses is really multiplication. Then we have a parentheses that shows we're grouping this. That's where we're going to start, and we're going to start inside of there. Anytime you have a grouping symbol, you're going to follow order of operations inside of there. That means we're going to square this 3. You want to make sure you don't do negative 3 squared. There is a negative sign in front of there, but that's not really included in the squaring. That's basically a minus sign. You almost want to see that as subtracting. So we're going to do the exponent before we apply that subtraction sign. And then this subtraction at the end would just happen after we do all of this stuff. So again, that negative sign is not included when we square this number. You're going to do 3 squared. That would give us 9. This would actually be a negative 9 in the parentheses. And the last one, we have a big grouping symbol, the square root symbol. That means we're going to do everything inside of there first, and then we'll evaluate the square root. So 10 plus, that's going to happen at the end. Plus is one of the later ones. And then we have in parentheses negative 8 squared. This time we actually will include the negative sign when we do this. That whole entire thing is negative 8 squared. And the reason we do that is because it's in parentheses. We're squaring the entire thing. It's negative 8 squared. This one, we have the whole thing in parentheses, but the exponent is on the inside of the parentheses. This is just saying 3 squared, and then we apply the negative. This is saying the entire negative 8 is squared. That's the first thing we're going to review with order of operations, when we have parentheses and exponents combined. So I'm going to walk you through the left side of this. You're going to try the right side on your own. These are really common mistakes with order of operations problems. If you have any questions, please ask for help. If you're not sure why I did something, you can always rewatch the video, pause it, ask questions. Let me know if you need help. So our first one is exponents when there are no parentheses. So here we have negative 2 squared. That negative sign, I really want you to see that as a minus sign, because this is really just 2 squared. We're going to get negative 4 from that. We're going to keep the negative sign with this. If there's no parentheses, the negative sign just follows the problem. And we do 2 squared, that gives us 4. I'm actually not going to touch anything else. I'm going to leave it exactly the same. Still have the 3 cubed minus 8 squared times 2. Now I'm going to do the next exponent. I'm still just working left to right. Negative 4 doesn't change. 3 to the third power is 3 times 3 times 3, which gives us 27. And again, I didn't change this at all. I'm going to keep working left to right. I'm going to square this 8. Again, that minus sign is not touched at all. It's minus whatever I get from 8 squared. Minus 64. Still keep the times 2 there. Now I have addition, subtraction, and I have a multiplication problem here. I'm going to do the multiplication next. 2 times 64 is 128. And now I have addition and subtraction. I'm going to work that left to right. That would give me 23 minus 128 is a negative 105. I really want you to compare that to the next problem. Now we have exponents that are outside of parentheses. So we have negative 4 in the parentheses, and then raised to the 4th power. That entire negative 4 is going to be raised to the 4th power. So on this calculator, I'm going to show you how you would type that in. We have negative 4 in parentheses. Make sure you use the negative sign, don't use the minus sign. And when we want to change the exponent, you could use this for an exponent of 2. But if we want to type any exponent, you use that little arrow, and then we can type in the 4. I'm just going to do that part here. Negative 4 raised to the 4th power is a positive 256. I'm also going to do the second exponent expression, just because I know these two aren't going to affect each other. I know I have an exponent over here and an exponent over here, and they're separated by division and multiplication. I know those are going to be done first, and then I'm going to do the stuff in between. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, you don't have to. You could write it out as a separate step. I'm just going to do all that in one shot. So I have my positive 256, and then I'm going to have negative 5 to the 3rd power. Again, it's very important that you put the parentheses around this. Negative 5 raised to the 3rd power is negative 125. So let's see what would happen if I didn't put parentheses around that negative 4 to the 4th. Negative 4 to the 4th. Without parentheses, the calculator completely understands order of operations. It sees that kind of as a minus sign. It's going to do the exponent first and keep the negative sign with it. So the calculator will help you. If you see parentheses around a number, put parentheses around that number. Really, the calculator does understand exactly what it's supposed to do. You just need to type it in correctly. From there, we're going to do this division first before the multiplication. We're working left to right. So 256 divided by negative 2 gives us negative 128. We keep the multiplication there. It's negative 128 times 125. That gives us 16,000. Alright, the next one is talking about dividing by fractions. Dividing by a fraction is actually going to increase the number, as long as the fraction is less than 1. Alright, our next one is dealing with negative exponents. This is the exact same thing as dealing with positive exponents. We could still use this key, so doing 2 raised to the negative second, make sure you type it in as negative second, not minus 2. That'll always give you a decimal. Negative exponents always give you decimals. I guess unless this number is 1 or 0. But negative exponents basically turn it into a fraction. That's basically 1 over 2 to the positive second. 1 over, what I'm really trying to say is 1 over 2 to the positive second power. Those are the exact same thing. Changing it into a fraction like this will give you the exact same result. We'll talk a lot more about that later. Either way, I'm going to do all of these exponents at the same time. 2 to the negative second, like I said, gave me that 0.25. Negative 8 squared is a positive 64. And then negative 2 raised to the negative 3rd power is negative 0.125. Now I have multiplication, subtraction, and another multiplication. I'm going to work that multiplication left to right. So 0.25 times 64 is the 16. I didn't really change this yet. Now is when I'm going to do that multiplication. Make sure you don't subtract first. You're multiplying before subtraction. That gives us 16 minus, that minus sign comes down. This gave me a negative 2. I put it in parentheses. You don't have to. I just think it looks cleaner rather than writing 2 minus signs right next to each other. It's not multiplication. I'm still subtracting. It's 16 minus negative 2, which is 18. The next one is a grouping symbol that's new, the cube roots. We're going to work with here. It's the same exact thing as a square root, except it's a different operation in the calculator really for you. It's really finding the number that is multiplied times itself 3 times to get us that bigger number. Unless it's a decimal, then it's going to be a smaller number. But either way, instead of multiplying it times itself twice, like squaring a number, cubing number is times itself by 3 times. This is working backwards to figure out what number we cube to get to that new number. It still serves as a grouping symbol. So we want to do everything inside of there, following order of operations first. So we're going to do 2 to the negative second. That changes into that 0.25. Nothing else changed yet. Now I'm going to do this division. Negative 250 divided by 0.25. That's negative 1,000. And now I'm going to do the cube root of 1,000. So you can see you have the square root just above this x squared. That's going to do something different. We're going to find the cube root under math. I think that's the fastest way to get there. Yeah, I don't see it as an actual keystroke. Okay, so after you hit math, you get this screen. Then you can see number 4 shows you what looks like a cube root symbol. You have the 3 on the outside, the check mark kind of symbol, and then an open parentheses. We're going to scroll down to 4, or you can just hit 4, and it brings it up on your screen. I'm going to clear this whole screen and bring that back up. Math again, and then 4 gives me that. That's basically asking for what's under the cube root. So I'm going to type in my negative 1,000. You probably don't even have to close the parentheses. I just like doing it because it looks better. And now that gives us negative 10. So negative 10 times negative 10 times negative 10 is what gave us this negative 1,000. That's what the cube root pretty much finds. Now we are going to subtract. That subtraction sign comes down. This gave me negative 10, so it's 5 minus negative 10. That's 15. Next, we're going to do an absolute value problem. So this is very similar to cube root. We want to do everything inside of there and then evaluate the absolute value of it. So just like up here, we did everything inside of there, and then we thought about what does this symbol really mean. That's what we're going to do first. We're going to do everything inside of here and then think about what does that symbol really mean. Well, the absolute value basically just turns a negative number into a positive and keeps a positive number positive. It's telling you the distance from 0 on a number line. So if you had the number negative 16, it's 16 away from 0. That's the absolute value of it. It has an absolute value of 16. So we're going to start with the exponent inside of here. 3 squared gives us 9. We're going to keep the parentheses there. We're still going to be multiplying those. Actually, that's our next step. We have a minus sign and multiplication. So we're going to multiply next. That gives us 18. 4 minus 18. Still not working on anything on the outside. We're still going to keep going on the inside until that's completely finished. 4 minus 18 is negative 14. We still have the absolute value bars around that. That's telling us that's going to change into a positive number. This is really being multiplied. It's 3 times the absolute value here. So it's going to be 3 times now positive 14. I'm keeping the parentheses there to show that we're multiplying. Now the 3 times 14 is going to happen before the subtraction. We're going to do multiplication before subtraction. That gives us 42. So 1 minus 42 is negative 41. All right, the next two have big fractions in them. This is a big fraction by itself. What I mean by a big fraction, just operations on top, operations on the bottom. This is the same kind of thing. Operations on the top of the fraction, operations on the bottom of the fraction. So we have to do those separately. We're going to do everything on top, then divide it by whatever we get from the bottom. This one's slightly different just because we have this plus 10. That's going to happen at the very end. We want to think about the fraction as basically a grouping symbol. I mean, it's also division, but it's basically grouping this. It's saying all of the stuff on top divided by all of the stuff on the bottom. It's grouping those two things. So we're going to do everything in that big fraction first, and then we would just do 10 plus whatever you get from that. So on this number 13, we're just going to do everything on top divided by everything in the bottom. We're going to start on the top by following order of operations. So in there, we also have the absolute value bars, which is grouping everything in here. So we have a group inside of a group. And we're going to follow order of operations inside of there. Minus 2 squared, we're going to keep the minus sign. We're just squaring the 2. That changes into a minus 4. Then we do negative 4 minus 4, that's negative 8. The absolute value comes next. We have finished everything inside of there. Now we just change that into a positive, and we keep the multiplication there. Next, we could really just keep going on top, actually. I'm going to go to the bottom just because I see exponents there. but it really doesn't matter. Those two don't affect each other at all. Actually, maybe I'll just do those at the same time. I have -2 times 8, that's -16. -2 squared outside of parentheses, there's no parentheses around that, it's just the 2 squared. Keep the negative sign, so that's -4. And then we divide -16 divided by -4 is a +4. Only difference here is that we have an extra number on the outside with an operation, so we're going to do 10 plus whatever we get from this. Actually, I think you could do that one on your own. Take a shot at it. I'm going to skip on to the substitution notes, which is going to be very, very quick. All I'm going to show you is that every single time you substitute numbers in, you need parentheses. That is very important because when you're doing an exponent on the outside of parentheses, it's different from the exponent on the inside. And when you substitute a number in, especially like this, 3d, you're not just writing the two numbers together. It doesn't become 33. It's 3 times d, so it becomes 3 times 3, which is exactly what I'm showing here. So I'm taking f, -3, plugging it right in there in parentheses. And that's going to be multiplied times whatever we get from this square root, which becomes the square root of 3 times 3 minus 5. Every number gets plugged in parentheses. You can solve it from there using the notes that we just took on order of operations. Really, that's the only difference here. We're using substitution to replace a variable with a number. It's extremely important that you do it with negative numbers especially, and when there's multiplication or exponents, which is pretty much going to be every problem that we see in algebra. So I'm just going to show you one more of those examples. We have -d times d squared minus 3d. So I'm going to plug in -4 right after that negative sign. That's basically multiplying. You could see this as multiplying -1 times that. Then we're going to put -4 in parentheses squared. Actually, I should really even have an extra set of parentheses just to keep it consistent. I should have an extra set of parentheses around this and this to show that all of that's actually happening inside of there. So the -4 is going in the parentheses, and we have these parentheses around the outside that match up with these blue ones. And finally, we have minus 3 times d, so minus 3 times -4 in parentheses. So that's the big thing that you have to worry about when you're substituting in a number. Just put the number in parentheses to show the operations that are happening around it.